We're in the midst of a huge transformation where our peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, she, her, and hers, and I am the Senior Partnerships Manager here at AllVoices. Today, I am very excited to welcome our next guest onto the interview series, Ingrid Harb. She is an international speaker and founder of the Women Ambassadors Forum, as well as a diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting firm, NOTA Inclusion. Ingrid, thank you so much for being here. If you want to share a little bit about yourself, including your pronouns, and when you were younger, do you remember how exactly you answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Thank you for having me. And Christina, you've been so flexible with me, so I'm so grateful for that. She, her, hers. And, you know, I'm going to start with a question because I still don't really think I have an answer. It's more of like I've had to like unlearn that question because there are so many, we're multidimensional beings, and we can have many passions and we can do many things because we're multidimensional beings. And so I always felt trapped when somebody would try to minimize me to one thing. I think right now, if you were to ask me that, would be to make this world a better place, in a way where it's a more equitable place. And that is what drives me. But so many things drive me. And so again, I think it's unlearning the way people ask that question, and knowing that I can have many answers at many different times in my life and that it's okay. But a little bit about me. I grew up in Mexico, moved to the States when I was 16. And so when I moved to the States, it was the first time that I was, I was in a dorm, and I was in a dorm with women from all over the world. And that contrast of growing up in Mexico with people that looked like me, that were from the same identity, race and religion, and going into the space where it was like culturally, diverse, really mirrored who I wanted to be, and also liberated me of knowing that there were things in my culture that I could unlearn. And so when I got to college, I knew that there were women that couldn't leave their country, and I wanted to do something about it, which is where the Women Ambassadors Forum was born. And that's where I created this like summit, but it's more like a retreat. It was 6 days. And I partnered with a Harvard professor and with my university at the time. And I would bring in like really top speakers, like former presidents. And because I called the Women Ambassadors Forum, I started to get ambassadors of countries that were applying, and these are teenagers that are completely running this conference. The entire thing, like there were no adults involved at all except the speakers. And there was just something so powerful that I noticed that I wanted to give women a lifeline. And I think that in this world that we live in, we don't realize that there are still so many people that need a lifeline, and that are in cultures and countries where they don't really have a choice to be somebody else or to be themselves. And so that was my driving force. And the more that I did the summits and the more that I met women from all over the world, the more I realized like how similar we were, right? Because at the end of the day, like I would always say, like, we were in these summits, but I wouldn't see difference. But it was really that connection that we were all seeking. And then this would create a community where the women felt connected and they could go back to their countries and grow initiatives or start things or move up the ladder and know that they had a sisterhood. So fast forward, I took jobs because I didn't think that this was a full-time job. I thought that this was my hobby. I actually kept running it while I was in a job. And in 2019, I knew that I wanted to do something on my own. And so I actually said I need 3 months paid to figure out what I needed to do. And I got that. It's another story. And that propelled me to start NOTA. And NOTA, which stands for none of the above, and strives for creating none of the above moments in companies, NOTA was born from just surrendering to the journey and working with clients and understanding what they needed. And once I was inside and I was seeing what companies needed, that's how I formed my business. So I just gave you a very long answer to your question.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much for sharing your journey to this work and the why behind why you're a founder of these two amazing kind of organizations and really ways of making the world a better place as well through spheres of influence too. In terms of when you are working within companies and when people reach out to you for kind of guidance and consulting as well, are there any common patterns you're seeing, especially over the last few years where when the pandemic started, and also a lot of people kind of doubling down on their diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, or rather trying to as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest is their leaders. They're trying to figure out a way where they can equip their leaders and they can um, empower them to know that they are an instrument of change and that there needs to be programming that is designed just for leaders because or people managers because they hold the culture of a company and it's important that they're trained right on empathy on trust is given and so how do they give trust and how do they receive trust and how do they respond to difficult situations how can they be um, purpose driven or presence driven, right? How can we be in the moment and not ask somebody, how they are, but like how they truly are and care about their people. And I think that this is a muscle that they need to develop. And so I've noticed that and this push for companies having programming just for their people managers and leaders. The second that I've noticed as well is year-long training for their employees on DEI that is authentic to their culture. And so creating programming that, I really don't think DEI is a one size fits all. Like it isn't. And so how can you create something where you people feel connected to and where they feel listened to and that it can increase that connection to the company culture. And then, the third thing that is a big part of the work that we do is with ERGs and really understanding the power that they can do. I think a lot of companies have them because it's a check in the box, like, oh, I have an ERG, but they don't give them resources, they don't give them support. There's no commitment, there's no sponsorship. Leaders are not involved in them. And so what happens is that you just drive whoever is leading them to burnout because they're not being compensated in any way, emotionally, monetarily, right? And so there needs to be support for these groups to thrive, but also this deep learning and intersectional fluency so that leaders that are creating these programs and that are building programs in companies can be a plus one, right? So like more people can join, not just from race or identity or, because what does it feel like if you're singled out, if people see you as one identity, right? And they can't see your full self. So you don't want isolation to be created. You want there to be cross ERG collaboration. And so how do you do that? You have to bring in somebody to create that collaboration, right? And ease for them, right? How do you give them ease? And then how do you align them to the company's values so that there's this true initiative, like they're truly driving change, but they're being supported to drive change. So those are some of the, I would say biggest patterns that I've seen. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree that you can't copy and paste someone else's diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy and put it within your own company. I think it's really similar to individuals as well. Everyone's on their different kind of journey as well, doing the internal work, and you need to do an audit of where you are realistically today in order to take those steps to move forward. As a former employee resource group leader as well, I definitely agree that you need to invest time, money, resources, and a true commitment to the work, and especially the leaders and folks who are really dedicating their time to do this as well. You mentioned intersectionality and recognizing that no group is a monolith. Where do companies start in really thinking about an intentional and intersectional diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy that is a continuous journey and not a, check the box?
Yeah, I think it again, it's you got to do the small steps and you have to have a clear strategy that holds people accountable. And that it's driven by the top down. And you got to have buy-in from the CEO. You have to have buy-in from leadership. Um, and then really driving um, these strategies in a way where they're transparent, right? And that people are informed on, and know what it is that the company is trying to do. You said it. I mean, you have to measure your work. You have to see if what you're doing works, because what doesn't get measured doesn't change. And so it is measured, but there is more that you can do that data can't measure, right? And it's understanding how can we be human beings first, and how can we be people first. And we keep trying to like pursue or push for purpose, but like presence is purpose. And it's how do we get there, and how do we as leaders and as companies create strategies that being for diversity, that being for inclusion or for belonging or for accessibility or for the way that they want to have a better workplace. It needs to be intentional, and it's not a I'm going to be there and it like works. I mean, it takes time. And I think that a lot of leaders are just so used to like getting results like right away. And this work doesn't work like that, right? You're talking about people, and we're all having such, complex and also just difficult sometimes is, moments. And I think that we forget that we're working with people.
And people are complicated and we do not have the answers. We are all engaging in the conversation and really have to actively be listening to each other as well, and also have that growth mindset too, along those same lines of not having all of the answers too, and be willing to be a little bit vulnerable, lead with empathy. I think also part of this process too is around education and re-education, and you brought up unlearning as well, which is important too. I know through these conversations, some folks have brought up that part of their strategy is diversity, equity, and inclusion training. I want to ask you, from your perspective, what role does DEI training have in creating more equity within an organization, and what the goal should not be as well?
Oh yeah, you're good. I love your questions. This is good. Um, I mean, I would say everything, because you'd start with training. Like you can't, I mean, you can measure your workplace, but if the only way you can measure if it's changing is if you do something about how you want about your people, and about how you want them to be aware of concepts or ways that they're not being inclusive. And so training is everything. I mean, that's what we mostly focus on, but I think it needs to be training that isn't about making people feel guilty or, in reinforcing things of the ways, or triggering people. I mean, it has to be intentional, and it has to be about empowering everybody's narrative. And you can't give what you don't have. I think you mentioned that. It's so you got to fill people up, and you got to teach them how to do that. And you have to, um, sometimes it could be just about talking about how we're doing, right? And a training could just be about that, about knowing how to talk about how we feel, or how do we listen, and how can we reply or respond to somebody having a bad day. And so it doesn't have to be that complicated, but you have to create, for me, training and bringing in awareness and bringing in love and bringing in hope and bringing in reminders to people of how we could do things differently, um, is everything. It's so important. And what was the second question? And what should we do? What shouldn't
But
we do?
it's not the goal. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that of pointing, fingers, of making people feel bad about what they've done or not, because I mean, yes, the system is is created not for everybody. But I think that making people feel guilty or pointing fingers or continuing to feed this fear or any sort of like, you know, false narrative is wrong. And so we need to approach it from a place of like giving, what is that saying? It's like giving people the benefit of the doubt, like giving, like thinking
Yeah.
that they're doing the yeah. And I think when you think that and you don't know what may be happening to them, you become more empathetic. And also I've realized, and I've actually, this is how we design a lot of our programs, is like not working from impulse or from an idea or from this impulsive idea to taking action. Like we really need to sit down with what we're wanting to do and make space for people to feel if that's a good idea, and like how does it sit with people, like does it resonate with you, and that's a more feminine way of working that is, not valued, but it's so important because then you're creating aligned action, you're creating things that work. And I see it as in my own entrepreneurship journey of like when I created things from impulse, it was a mess because I didn't even make space to be like, well, does this work? Like, should this work? Like, how does it work? How does it make people feel? Or, I mean, there's so many things that we do out of impulse that just don't work. And I feel like I see that with my clients. Like I see executives working out of impulse and sending things and being like, we got to do this, but they don't make the space to see, well, maybe we're already doing this, or should we do this, or how could we do this, or let's sit and see if that's something we should be doing. So make space for feeling and sensing and using your intuition. It's important.
It's really important. And you have to listen to that intuition. You have to think critically about why we're doing the actions that we're doing as well, and really send that message too. And really kind of lean into these conversations. I think a lot of work has been done. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of progress that needs to happen as well. But we're having great conversations now. Is there anyone that really stands out to you that you're just really excited by and, has stood out to you, and why?
Yeah, of conversations with people or clients or,
Yeah.
well, I am at the Great Places to Work conference. I actually did see a lot of DEI people here, which was really exciting. And a lot of what the conference was about this idea of like, how do we make companies people again, and not seeing people as employees, but as people, and talking about purpose and empathy and trust and all the things that are a part of building a culture of inclusion and belonging. But I did just hear Michael Phelps, and like literally 10
Love
minutes
it.
ago. Yeah. And I think it like reminded me of, I'm an athlete as well. And the mentality that you have when you're an athlete and the dedication, and it's all about making small things, like small changes, and focusing on the routines and the time you sleep, and like how all of those little things actually impact your performance. I feel like I was reminded of that with him. And also, because he said that he was talking about like all the little things that made him so great. But I think what I also really loved about his session now, because he talks a lot about mental health, of like never to assume. We just have to stop assuming, like, and being in our heads. Like you never know what that person is doing, even if it looks perfect. Like he was saying, he tried to, end his life, and and all these things that you just see that person on TV and you're like, oh, that person's perfect, like it's perfection. But you don't know what they're going through. And so I think that that was awesome. Like I am reminded. I mean, obviously I'm always reminded of that, but it was, yeah, I'm kind of very inspired because I just heard him talk. But also Michael Bush, who is the CEO of Great Place to Work, like he's a phenomenal speaker. And so it's just been really good to see. Also, we just saw the CEO of Accenture. I mean, just the way that she talks and how empathetic she is and how she, I mean, in such a feminine way, like was so inspiring. Yeah. So,
I love that. I also love a good conference as a source of great conversations and inspiration for all of the things that people are also sharing as well and coming together and connecting to make those meaningful connections too and
yeah.
sharing the journey. We've all heard the saying probably in kindergarten, don't assume, and why as well. So I definitely agree with that too. Ingrid, I want to pass the mic back to you to see if there's anything that I didn't directly ask that you want to share with folks who are listening, or if you'd like to underscore any kind of key insights you hope people really bring with them after hearing our episode today.
Uh, I would say, I mean, I'm still at the conference. It just ended, so it's a good, I feel like I'm like recapping it with you. Um, I'm really excited and hopeful that to see all of the CEOs that I got to see and the the chief DIs, DIAB or oh my God, I can't even DEIA or B, accessibility or belonging. It's, you call it what you call it, but it's all of them. Um, I'm just inspired. Like I'm really excited, hopeful that they are like people are trying to make work better and like really having these conversations about what does the future of work look like and how can we be more human. It sounds crazy, but it's so simple. Like you just have to be a good human, and I think that we forget to be that. And it just really inspired me that so many companies and people, like I would be sitting and and people would be like so open and be like, I need that, like can you help me, and like, and that's exciting. Like I'm excited, I'm like happy that I was here because um the companies that aren't doing anything about this like will be left out, and if you don't take this seriously, like you're not going to have good talent and diversity, which equals not, you won't innovate and you won't exist. And so take this seriously, do something about it, and bring experts into your team and bring people that, make sure you're in the room and you notice who isn't in the room. And so, yeah, there's a lot that I would say, but I just would say that, don't assume that people, assume that people are doing the best they can. And definitely if it really like after this conference, it feels like a lot of companies are just starting. There's a lot of them that, have been in a journey for a while. But I just hope that they actually take DEI seriously because this is a real problem and people are suffering and mental health, and it's increasing by the minute, especially in the world that we live in with social media. And if we don't do something about it, we're talking about lives here. Yeah.
I love that you're feeling inspired, and I appreciate you recapping the conference and the inspiration that you are receiving from kind of these conversations happening as well. And you're right, companies and leaders also who are not focusing on diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, accessibility are going to be left behind because it prohibits innovation and it's things that people are looking for in their employers now as well. And they're asking questions, and the role of work in people's lives is going to consistently be changing. So need to keep up with these conversations. Ingrid, thank you so much for being on Reimagining Company Culture this afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course, and as a reminder for folks listening, at AllVoices, we really believe in employees and employers being seen, heard, and understood, and know it's a requirement for the business to really succeed overall. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.